Pine Bluff, Arkansas, the 9th of October, 1996. The morning air hung heavy with that in-between feeling only a southern fall could offer, warm enough to shed the coat by noon, but just cool enough to feel a change was coming. The leaves were golden, the sidewalks damp, and the quiet hum of another weekday had settled over the town like it always did. Students were already shuffling into the halls of Pine Bluff High School, their voices echoing between rows of metal lockers, chatter about homecoming, algebra tests, and the latest gossip bouncing off the walls. Emily Carter didn't stand out in that crowd. She wasn't the kind of girl to draw attention. She wasn't a cheerleader. She wasn't the rebel. She was 15, quiet, a little artsy, always sketching in the margins of her notebooks. She was the kind of girl who remembered your birthday, who wrote handwritten thank you notes, who helped her mum fold laundry without being asked. But on that particular Wednesday, Emily did something she rarely ever did. She left school early, and then she vanished. By the time the final bell rang at 3:10 that afternoon, Emily was already gone without a trace, without a witness, without a goodbye. Karen Carter, her mother, noticed the silence first. Karen worked nights as a nurse at Jefferson Regional. That afternoon she'd slept light, listening for the familiar clatter of the screen door, the soft patter of footsteps in the kitchen, the faint sound of her daughter warming up leftovers. But by 5 p.m. the house was still. No music, no television, no Emily. At 5:45, Karen began to worry. She called the school. The woman at the front desk flipped through the attendance sheet. Emily? She signed out around 1, said she wasn't feeling well, left on her own. That didn't sit right. Karen hung up, grabbed her keys, and drove the loop Emily usually walked. From the high school down Wellington Drive, past the convenience store where they sometimes stopped for sodas, past the church parking lot, through the residential stretch with picket fences and porch swings. No sign of her daughter. By 7 p.m., panic was setting in. Karen dialed her best friend, called Emily's friend Lindsay, drove back to the school, and walked the perimeter herself with a flashlight. At 10:12 p.m., she stood outside the police station in a sweatshirt and jeans, trembling from something colder than October air. She filed a missing persons report. The officer on duty was polite, but not concerned. Teenagers run off all the time, he said. She'll probably turn up. But Karen knew her daughter. Emily didn't run. Emily didn't wander. Emily came home. That night, Karen sat by the kitchen window, watching the porch light flicker. It had always been Emily's job to change that bulb. She never missed it. The next morning, when Emily still hadn't returned, something shifted. A formal search began at 10 a.m. Thursday morning. Volunteers from town fanned out across the neighborhood. Police canvassed nearby stores, questioned classmates. Dogs were brought in from Little Rock. They traced her scent 3 blocks east before the trail abruptly stopped right near an alley behind the school's maintenance lot. It was there, in the overgrown brush, that officers found the first item of interest. A sock. One white cotton ankle sock, crumpled and damp from the dew. It matched the kind Emily wore. But not much else was found. No bag, no shoes, no signs of struggle, no witnesses. Her teachers were baffled. Lindsay, her best friend, couldn't remember anything odd. She was just normal, Lindsay later told investigators. Smiling, said she had a stomachache, said she was going to walk home. Karen began making flyers that afternoon. By Friday morning, her face was pale and sleepless, holding a poster with Emily's school photo. It was the one where Emily had curled her hair slightly, just enough to feel different. Please, Karen said to the camera crews, if someone sees this, if you've seen her say something, anything. Oh, the story aired on the local news. Teen girl missing after leaving school. Then it faded. By the end of the month, the search was scaled back. Detectives had no leads. The school counselor quietly removed Emily's name from class rosters. Teachers adjusted their seating charts. By December, Emily Carter was a name no one wanted to mention, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know what else to say. Time passed in ways only time can. Karen never moved. She stayed in the same house on Wellington Drive, kept Emily's room intact, bed made, clothes hanging, journals still stacked on the shelf. She kept calling the station every month. Same questions. Same answers, no new updates. Detective Ray Delgado was the lead on the case in '96. Back then, he'd handled a dozen cases a year, most of them runaways, custody disputes, teenagers with short fuses and long nights. But this one haunted him. Something about Emily stayed. Maybe it was the clean way she disappeared. No mess, no noise, just a gap, like she'd been erased. Delgado stayed on the force until 2009. He retired without answers. Karen sent him a Christmas card every year. He never failed to write back, even if he had nothing new to say. 17 years went by. Then, in the spring of 2013, a new family moved into 218 Wellington Drive, Ive. Kyle and Hannah Richardson, first-time homeowners, newlyweds, expecting their first child. The house had been a rental for years, cycling through tenants, but Kyle was handy. He saw potential, a fixer-upper with bones and charm. On a warm May afternoon, Kyle crawled under the house to inspect a pipe. The crawl space was tight, low ceiling, dry dirt, old insulation curled in the corners. He was looking for a leak, but what he found stopped him cold. Wedged behind a joist beam, half buried in dust, was a shoe. A small white sneaker, size 6. It was stained, yellowed with age, and paired with nothing else, just sitting there, forgotten. Kyle pulled it out, brushed it off, then froze. Written inside the tongue of the shoe, in fading marker, was a name. E. Carter. He didn't know what it meant, not at first, but that night his wife Googled the name, and the first result was a missing poster. A teenage girl with soft eyes and curled hair. Emily Carter, last seen the 9th of October, 1996, left school early, never made it home. Kyle called the police the next morning. Within 24 hours, the house on Wellington Drive was surrounded with yellow tape. Forensics vans pulled into the driveway. Neighbors stood on their porches in silence. Karen was contacted immediately. She hadn't been to the house in over a decade, but when she walked onto that front lawn and saw the investigators moving carefully through the dirt, something inside her collapsed. She asked to see the shoe. A young officer brought it out in a clear plastic evidence bag. Karen didn't need confirmation. She whispered, "That's hers." What followed was a reopening of the case. Files were pulled from storage, interviews re-reviewed, and a single question began to rise through 17 years of dust. How did Emily's shoe end up in the crawl space of her own home? And why hadn't anyone found it before? Detective Amanda Louie, just 6 years old when Emily disappeared, now led the case. A Pine Bluff native herself, Amanda had grown up hearing whispers about the girl who vanished. She remembered candlelight vigils, the pink ribbons tied to fences, the silence in school halls. Now, she was the one asking questions. Who lived in the house back in 1996? Who had access to the crawl space? And most unsettling of all, could Emily have been there the entire time? The shoe was tested for DNA. Inside, traces of biological material remained Emily's skin cells, along with something else, a hair, not hers. The crawl space was searched thoroughly. Dogs were brought back in. The soil was sifted. A partial page from a notebook was found, water damaged and torn. Most of the writing had faded, but a few words remained legible. "If I don't come back." Then it stopped. That single fragment shifted everything. No longer just a missing person. Now, a possible crime scene. Delgado was brought out of retirement in a consulting role. When Amanda handed him the notebook page, he stared at it for a long time. He recognized the handwriting. He'd seen it before on Emily's school papers, on her journal entries the mother had once shared. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched. "I missed something," he said. Amanda asked him what he meant. Delgado didn't answer. He just turned, looked toward the old Carter house and whispered, almost to himself, "She never left. This place." And with that, the investigation turned inward, toward the house itself, toward the people who lived there, toward the cracks in time that had gone unexamined. Emily Carter hadn't vanished into thin air. She had left behind a clue. 17 years later, it had finally been found. But the truth, it was still buried, somewhere beneath floorboards, somewhere between memory and denial. The girl who never came home might never have left at all. May 14th, 2013, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. The house on Wellington Drive stood quiet again. For almost 2 decades, it had weathered the heat of southern summers and the brittle frost of winters. It had passed through the hands of renters, some who stayed only months, others who never even unpacked fully. But on that Tuesday morning in May, the house belonged to someone who wanted to stay. Kyle and Hannah Richardson had moved in just 3 weeks earlier, newly married, expecting their first child in the fall. For them, 218 Wellington wasn't just a house, it was a start, a chance to build something real, something that lasted. They had been drawn to the place for its charm, the creaky wood floors, the deep porch swing, the old oak tree that leaned like an elder keeping watch over the property. It was a little rough around the edges, but that was the appeal. Kyle was a contractor, handy. He loved a project. Hannah was a nurse, like Karen Carter had been all those years ago. The symmetry was eerie, but they didn't know that yet. On that morning, Kyle was under the house again. The crawl space was tight and dry, about 3 feet high, stretching beneath the living room and kitchen. A pipe had been dripping something minor, but enough to need attention. He slid on his mechanic's creeper with a flashlight in one hand and a wrench in the other. It smelled of earth and rust. Dust clung to every surface, particles dancing in the beam of his light, old nails, bits of insulation, a discarded bottle cap. Then something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just trash, a wad of fabric stuffed near one of the joists. But when he reached for it and pulled, he realized it wasn't trash at all. It was a shoe, small, white, the kind a teenager might wear. He turned it over in his hand. The tread was thin, worn in a way that suggested it had walked many blocks. The laces were still knotted, stiff from time. He brushed the dirt off the heel, and that's when he saw the name. Written in faint marker, just inside the tongue of the shoe, were 2 letters and a last name. E. Carter. He stared at it for a long moment. The name meant nothing to him. Not yet. That night, after dinner, Hannah sat at the kitchen table with the shoe beside her. She typed the name into Google. The search engine filled in the rest before she finished. Emily Carter, missing Pine Bluff. Hannah clicked. A black and white school photo appeared first, then a headline. Teen girl vanishes after leaving school in 1996. She leaned in. Kyle stood behind her, arms crossed, unmoving. The shoe matched perfectly. The timeline fit. The address fit. Emily Carter had lived in this very house, and now her shoe, untouched, unfound for 17 years, was sitting on their kitchen counter. The next morning they contacted the Pine Bluff Police Department. A unit arrived within the hour. The evidence was bagged and sealed. Statements were taken. The crawl space was roped off. And before the sun had set, word had reached Karen Carter. She had not heard her daughter's name spoken by authorities in years. Karen was 61 now, thinner than before, her hair grayer, her face more worn. But the quiet fire behind her eyes remained the same. When she got the call, she didn't scream, she didn't cry. She simply asked, "Where?" They told her the address. Her knees gave out. She had not been back to Wellington Drive since 2001. She arrived later that afternoon, driven by a neighbor. The street looked the same. The trees had grown taller. A new coat of paint covered the house. But she knew it. Every step, every line in the sidewalk, every crack in the bricks. The officers greeted her gently. When they showed her the shoe, now sealed in a clear evidence bag, she pressed her fingers to the plastic and whispered something no one could hear. The press hadn't caught wind yet, but inside the department, something stirred. The case was reclassified, not just a missing person, now a potential crime scene, possibly a homicide. Detective Amanda Louis was assigned the case. At 29, Amanda was younger than Emily had ever lived to be. She'd grown up just miles from Pine Bluff, attending the same schools, walking the same streets. She'd remembered candlelight vigils as a child. The name Emily Carter had been spoken like a ghost story, real but unreachable. Now, Amanda stood in the same crawl space where that ghost had left her first clue. She knelt down, ran a gloved hand across the dirt floor, noting how dry it still was, how easily something could sit here, undisturbed, for years. She asked for blueprints of the house, requested tenant records, filed warrants for past landlords. Her team mapped every square inch of the crawl space, then moved upward into the house itself. That's when they found the second piece. It was tucked behind a section of drywall in the utility closet, a torn page, curled and water-damaged from what looked like a spiral-bound notebook. Most of the ink had bled through, but a few words remained. "Don't come back." And in the lower left corner half a sentence, "Please don't go looking." The handwriting was unsteady, but still legible. Detective Louis compared it to school records. The match was clear. It was Emily. Karen was shown the page later that evening. She held it like a relic, tracing her daughter's writing with trembling fingers. "I always told her to write down what she was feeling," she said softly. "I didn't know it would be the last thing she ever did." The police weren't ready to declare anything yet, but within 48 hours, the media caught wind. By Friday morning, the story was everywhere. 17 years later, new clue in Emily Carter case. Missing girl's shoe found in home crawl space. News vans lined the street. Microphones appeared on lawns. The Richardsons were forced to leave temporarily, advised by police to stay with relatives. Karen issued a short statement from her porch, the same porch where Emily had once carved her initials into the wooden banister. "She was here," she said simply. "This whole time she was here." Detective Louis brought in forensics, soil samples, fiber testing, DNA swabs. The shoe held more than dust. There were biological traces inside consistent with Emily's DNA from prior samples. And something else. A single strand of dark hair. Short, male. No root. No immediate match. It wasn't definitive, but it wasn't nothing. Louis pulled the original case files. She laid them out in her office, page by page, photo by photo. Statements, maps, school records, witness accounts. One document caught her eye. A note written by Detective Ray Delgado, the original investigator. It mentioned the crawl space. In a scribbled margin, he'd written, "Crawl space seems undisturbed. No reason to search further." Amanda leaned back in her chair. That decision made in 1996 had shaped everything. She picked up the phone and dialed Delgado's number. He picked up after 3 rings. "Detective Delgado," she said. "This is Amanda Lewis with Pine Bluff PD. We've reopened the Emily Carter case. I think you'll want to see what we found." There was silence on the other end. Then a single word. "Where?" That night, Delgado walked the perimeter of 218 Wellington Drive Ive, just like he had 17 years before. But this time, he didn't step back from the porch. He stepped inside. The house had changed, but it hadn't. He stood at the doorway to Emily's old room, hands in his pockets. It still smelled like dust and memories. When Amanda showed him the shoe, he exhaled through his nose, barely audible. "Dumb. Encifre." When she handed him the page from the notebook, he held it longer. He didn't say a word. She asked if he remembered missing anything back then. He shook his head slowly. "Maybe we didn't look hard enough," he said. "Or maybe we were looking in the wrong places." They stood in silence for a long time. Then Amanda said, "There's more." Delgado looked up. She nodded toward the floor. "We think there's something else under the kitchen." Delgado stared at her, his face unreadable. "You think she was here the whole time?" Amanda didn't answer right away. "Instead," she said, "I think Emily Carter left something behind, and I think we've only just started listening." They left the house as night fell. Outside, the cicadas hummed. Inside, the past waited quiet, buried, and very much alive. A week after the discovery of Emily Carter's shoe, the house on Wellington Drive had become the center of a quiet storm. Why hadn't Emily run? The page recovered from the utility closet had been sent to the Arkansas State Crime Lab for moisture lifting and ink restoration. It wasn't much to work with, just a water-warped scrap of notebook paper torn along the edge, but the handwriting was unmistakable. It was Emily's end of... The full sentence, after enhancement, now read, "They said not to tell anyone. If I don't come back, don't try to find me." And Amanda stared at it for a long time, turning the words over in her mind like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. They, not he, not she, they. Who were they? The pronoun opened up new angles, New possibilities. Could Emily have been coerced by more than one person? Was she part of something larger, something hidden within the quiet rows of suburban houses and polite front lawns? Amanda met with forensic linguist Dr. Marcia Eddington, an expert in behavioral handwriting analysis. The choice of words, Eddington said, tapping the page, suggests fear. But more than that, it suggests obligation. She wasn't just scared. She believed following orders was the only option. Amanda nodded. She was protecting someone, or being manipulated into thinking she had to. Amanda left that meeting with a growing sense that Emily hadn't disappeared in an instant. She'd been slipping away piece by piece. And someone had known. Someone had watched. That evening, Amanda revisited the witness logs from 1996. Teachers, classmates, neighbors. One name kept surfacing, not because of what they said, but because of what they hadn't. Lindsay Moore, Emily's best friend. 17 years had passed. Lindsay still lived in Pine Bluff. She worked at a dental office on Jefferson Street, rented a one-bedroom apartment, and had never married. No priors. No criminal record. Just quiet. When Amanda called and asked to meet, Lindsay hesitated. "I don't know if I can help," she said. "It's been so long." "We found something," Amanda said. "Something Emily left behind." That changed everything. They met at a small cafe off Main Street. Lindsay wore a faded cardigan and held her coffee like a shield. Her hands trembled slightly. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear to you, I didn't know what happened to her." "I believe you," Amanda said calmly. "But I think you knew something wasn't right." Lindsay nodded slowly. "She changed that week," she said. "Not in a big way, just off. Like she was trying to act normal but didn't quite know how anymore." Amanda leaned in. "Did she say anything?" There was a pause. Then Lindsay said something she had never told anyone. "She gave me a tape." Amanda's eyes locked onto hers. "What kind of tape?" "A cassette," Lindsay said. "Just one. She handed it to me on a Friday after school. Said it was a mix she made. But when I listened to it, there was no music. Amanda's Pulse Weekend. What was on it?" She was talking, not like a diary, more like she knew someone would find it someday. Amanda whispered, "Do you still have it?" Lindsay hesitated. Then she nodded. "It's in my closet. I never threw it out. I didn't know if I should." 2 hours later, the tape was in Amanda's hands. The label was handwritten. Emily, October 1996. The handwriting was still clear, the plastic warped slightly from time, but intact. Amanda brought it to the station and sat in a soundproof room with an old tape deck and a forensic audio technician. They pressed play. A soft click, then silence, then a voice. "Hi, it's me. I guess if you're hearing this, something's wrong." It was Emily. Her voice was light, adolescent, but low. Measured. She was trying not to cry. "I don't know who to talk to. I'm scared. He said not to tell, that no one would believe me." Amanda gripped the table. "He watches me. Not just at school. At home, too. He stands at the fence sometimes. I close the blinds, but I know he's there." The tape crackled. "I think he was in the house once. I told Mom it was nothing, but I heard the steps, the creaking on the stairs. Then nothing. Then silence again. For almost 30 seconds, then her voice returned, lower, almost a whisper. "There's a door under the kitchen. I never knew it was there until he opened it. It squeaked. The hinges, they sound like nails scraping metal. That's how I knew he was there." Amanda froze. The house had no such door. At least, not anymore. She stood up, rewound the tape, played that part again. A door under the kitchen. She called the city archives, asked for blueprints from before 1996. It took 3 days, but on the 4th, a blueprint arrived by courier. There, clearly marked, was a trapdoor leading from the kitchen floor to what was labeled as a service storage crawl, sealed during a 1989 remodeling project. No one had checked it, not in 17 years. Amanda ordered a team to the house. Karen was called in again. She watched from the porch, holding the handrail, as officers lifted the kitchen floorboards one by one. Dust rose, a breath from the past. Then they saw it, a metal ring, half buried under a wooden plank. They pulled. A narrow shaft, just large enough for a person to slip through, descended into darkness. The air that escaped smelled of earth and rot. The search began immediately. Cameras were lowered. Forensics entered in suits. At the bottom was a dirt floor, undisturbed. But in one corner, a bundle, wrapped in a faded towel. They opened it slowly. Inside was a school ID, Pine Bluff High, issued to Emily Carter, and a small cassette recorder, the same model Lindsay had described. Amanda held it like glass. They rewound the tape inside, pressed play, and heard something no one expected. Emily's voice again. This time panic. "He's coming. He found the other tape. He says I'm not leaving." Rustling, a metallic creak, then a scream. The tape ended. Amanda set the device down and stepped back. The silence in the room was deafening. They now had two recordings, a shoe, a page of handwriting, and a sealed chamber no one had touched in almost 2 decades. Emily had never left. She had hidden, called for help in the only way she knew how. And now, her voice had returned. From the depths of the earth, from beneath the kitchen floor, from 17 years of silence. It had come back to speak. The trapdoor beneath the kitchen floor had been sealed since 1989. 17 years later, it was Emily Carter who led them back to it, not in person, but through her words, recorded on aging cassette tape, her voice muffled and frightened, but resolute. "He's coming," she had said. Now, in the stillness of the kitchen at 218 Wellington Drive, Ive, crime scene tape cut across the cabinets and marked the edges of the open floor. The room smelled of fresh sawdust and the faint metallic tang of disturbed dust. Investigators moved with precision, their gloved hands brushing surfaces, their eyes trained on details others wouldn't notice. Detective Amanda Lewis stood near the opening, arms crossed, watching as a forensic team descended into the subfloor chamber. Beneath her feet, they were walking in silence, mapping the space, scanning walls, taking soil samples inch by inch. At the far end, near the corner where the cassette recorder had been found, one technician stopped. "Something here," he called out. Amanda crouched, leaned down and shined her light along the exposed joists. There, snagged against a rough nail in one of the floorboards, was a single thread of fabric. Pale blue, almost the color of a school uniform shirt. It was brittle with age, frayed on one end. "Bag it," she said. Nearby, another officer lifted a layer of dirt near the foundation and found a second item, a broken button plastic pearl, toned with a hairline crack through the middle. Again, palais bleu. Amanda felt a chill run through her chest. These were not remnants of a forgotten storage room. These were personal, intimate clothing items. Emily's. Within 24 hours, the Arkansas State Crime Lab confirmed it. The fiber was a match for the standard-issue Pine Bluff High Girls dress code shirt from 1996. And the button was part of the same model sold in local department stores only for 2 seasons, then discontinued. Karen Carter had kept one of Emily's identical shirts boxed in her attic. The lab compared the samples. No doubt, Emily had been there. And not just briefly, not just passing through. She had been inside that chamber long enough to leave pieces of herself behind. Amanda requested a second forensic sweep, this time using newer tools. Ultraviolet light, vapor collection, microparticle analysis. These were technologies that didn't exist in 1996. What had once been invisible could now be revealed. Dr. Hannah Brooks, a forensic biologist from Little Rock, led the new search. She was methodical, precise, the kind of investigator who saw patterns in chaos. 3 hours into her examination, she paused, knelt beside a load-bearing beam, and examined the surface under a black light. Their faint, barely perceptible was a partial print, smudged, incomplete, but human. Amanda watched as Dr. Brooks called for a scanner. "We might have touched DNA," she said. "Nothing concrete, but it's something." Amanda nodded. "We'll take something." By the time they wrapped for the evening, the team had collected 2 fabric fibers, a button, a partial palm print, trace DNA swabs from multiple surfaces, a rusted hinge fragment from the original trapdoor, Amanda stared at the evidence table later that night. It looked unassuming: small plastic bags, unmarked tape reels, dusty artifacts from beneath the floor. But they told a story. Not loud, not complete, but a story nonetheless. The next morning, she received a call from the Historical Records Office. They had unearthed something unusual: a copy of a hand-drawn diagram submitted to the police in late 1996, weeks after Emily's disappearance. It was a sketch made by Karen Carter. In it, the outline of the family's home was traced in blue pen. Certain areas were circled in red. One was the living room closet, another was the front porch. But one mark stood out: the kitchen floor. Karen had labeled it Emily's hiding spot, trapdoor. Amanda sat in silence. She pulled the original police case file. There was no mention of this diagram. It had been logged, but no record showed it was ever followed up. It had sat in a drawer for 17 years. Amanda took the sketch to Karen that afternoon. When Karen saw it, she gasped. "I remember drawing this," she said. "I begged them to check it. I thought maybe she ran away and came back. Maybe she was hiding. She used to crawl under there during storms when she was little." Amanda didn't say a word. She didn't have to. They both knew what it meant, that the past had whispered and no one had listened. Now they were listening. Amanda returned to the house that evening alone. The crime scene was still sealed, but the forensics team had left for the day. She walked quietly through the living room, past the taped cabinets and lifted floorboards, to the open square in the kitchen where the trapdoor had once been hidden. She sat beside it, listened. Sometimes silence is louder than noise. Sometimes the weight of 17 years speaks without sound. She remembered what Delgado had said to her the week before. Sometimes the mistake isn't what we find, it's what we assume isn't there. Amanda looked around the room. The light was fading. A shaft of orange sun cut across the counter, slanting through the blinds. She pictured Emily here, small, nervous, walking home alone. Maybe she stopped in the kitchen. Maybe she heard the door creak. Maybe she knew someone was already inside. What would she have done? Where would she have gone? Amanda stood, walked to the far side of the room, and knocked. A hollow sound answered back. She pulled up her phone, called for another warrant. There was one more place to check. The base of the wall near the pantry had been patched sloppily. Different color paint. A panel slightly raised. It wasn't in the original blueprint. Amanda had missed it before. An hour later, with tools in hand and permission granted, she removed the panel. Behind it was a shallow cavity, no more than 12 inches deep. Inside it, a crumpled piece of cloth, stained, dusty, wrapped around something hard. She opened it slowly. A button, and beneath it, a tiny, rusted necklace, charm-shaped like a dog. It was cracked, but recognizable. Amanda took a photo and sent it to Karen. Within 5 minutes, her phone rang. Karen's voice was shaking. "I gave that to her when she turned 13, she said. "We found it in a cereal box. She never took it off." Amanda didn't speak. She didn't have to. Now they had something new. Not just a room, not just fibers, not just fear. They had connection. Between Emily's bedroom, between the trapdoor, between the wall. Emily had moved through this house, afraid and unseen, and left breadcrumbs for someone in it to follow. 17 years too late, someone finally had. Amanda returned to the department and laid the pieces on the evidence table. Charm, button, threads, tapes. She called Detective Ray Delgado, asked him to meet. That night, they sat together in the empty conference room. Amanda played the second tape, the one recovered from the cassette recorder below the floor. Delgado listened, jaw clenched, eyes unfocused. When the tape ended, he looked up. "There's a third person on that recording," he said. Amanda blinked. "What do you mean?" He rewound it, played the final moments again. Emily's voice. "He's coming." Then a second voice, low, distorted, barely audible, but present. A voice that didn't belong to her, or to anyone in the file. Amanda stared at the waveform on the screen. Delgado leaned back. "She wasn't alone," he said. Amanda nodded. "I think it's time," she said. "Time for what?" "To find out who else was inside that house." They had a voice. They had fibers. They had a name whispered in fear. But what they didn't have was someone to answer for it. Detective Amanda Louie knew the evidence was closing in on a truth Pine Bluff hadn't wanted to face. The story of Emily Carter had always lived in shadow and posters stapled to telephone poles, in prayers whispered behind closed doors. But now that shadow had a direction, a shape, and it had a name: Glenn Weaver. In 1996, Glenn Weaver lived directly next door to the Carter family, 219 Wellington Drive, mid-40s, divorced, no children. A part-time handyman who did odd jobs around the neighborhood: roof patching, fence repair, the occasional garage cleanup. Nothing criminal on paper, but enough whispers, enough unease. Karen Carter had mentioned him once in the original interviews. He was strange, she'd said, too friendly, watched too much. Emily said he made her uncomfortable. But it never made it into the primary case notes. Back then, no one wanted to accuse the man next door without cause, and Glenn Quiet, solitary Glenn, never volunteered anything. He was questioned once, briefly, claimed he'd been out of town that week visiting family in Missouri. No one verified it. No one really tried. That had been the end of it. Until now. Amanda pulled the old report. No alibi confirmation, no follow-up, just a two-line summary in Detective Delgado's notebook. Glenn W., nothing unusual, interview complete. But there was something else. A notation from March 1997, 5 months after Emily vanished. Noise complaint at 219 Wellington. Unlawful entry into adjacent vacant property. Subject G. Weaver, released with warning. End of. Amanda tracked down the report. It described an incident where Glenn had been caught inside the very house Emily once lived in 218 Wellington, 2 months after Karen Carter moved out. He'd said he was checking on a broken window, said the landlord had asked him to look. No charges filed. Amanda stared at the paper. That house, that crawl space, that man. She filed a motion. Within days, they had an address. Glenn Weaver was still in Arkansas, living 120 miles north, in a rural cabin outside of Jasper. He hadn't owned a phone in over 5 years. Amanda and a deputy drove out on a Friday morning, through winding roads and pine-covered hills, until the GPS went dark. The cabin was modest, a rusted pickup out front, empty dog bowls, no mail in the box. Amanda knocked. The door creaked open. Glenn stood in the doorway. His face was sunken, grey hair hanging behind his ears, eyes bloodshot but alert. He looked like a man who hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, maybe longer. He didn't seem surprised to see them. "Detective," he said, "you finally made it." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "You knew we'd come." He shrugged. "Figured one day someone would. Can't bury the past forever." She stepped forward. "Mind if we talk?" He motioned toward the porch chairs. They sat. Amanda noticed a deep scratch across the top of his right hand. Faint, healing, less than a week old. She filed it away. "We reopened the Carter case," she began. "You lived next door in 96. "I did." "Do you remember Emily?" "I do." His voice was flat, unemotional. Amanda leaned forward. "She vanished after school. Her belongings were recently found under the house next door, including a cassette tape." Glenn didn't flinch. She studied his face. Every twitch, every blink. "I need to ask where you were on the 9th of October, 1996. Glenn looked toward the trees. The wind moved slightly. "I told the other guy," he said. "Back then, I was visiting my sister in Missouri. Can we verify that?" He paused. "She's dead now." Amanda said nothing. "You ever go into the Carter house after they left?" she asked. He looked at her, held the gaze. "I helped the landlord patch some drywall years ago. Any reason you'd be in the crawl space?" He shook his head. "Never went under, didn't need to." Amanda opened her folder and pulled out a photo of the white sneaker. She held it up. "You recognize this?" He glanced. "Looks like a kid's shoe." It was under the floor, 17 years. Still no reaction. "We also found a broken necklace. It belonged to her." "I'm sorry about that," he said, but there was no sorrow in his voice. Amanda let the silence hang. Then she stood. "We may be back," she said. "I'll be here," Glenn replied. She left with more questions than answers. But she had something now. A location. a reaction, a cut across a hand. Back in Pine Bluff, Amanda requested a warrant. 3 days later, the sheriff's office returned to Glenn's cabin with a full search order. Inside, they found exactly what they didn't want to. A box in the back room, duct-taped shut. Inside, an old flannel shirt, a broken pocket knife, a yellowed folder containing photos of Pine Bluff from the 1990 S Street corners, school entrances, residential driveways, and at the bottom, a folded school schedule. Emily Carter's sophomore year. Amanda stared at it in disbelief. There was no way he would have had this unless... She didn't finish the thought. He was arrested on the spot. At the station, Glenn sat in the interrogation room with his wrists cuffed, his eyes low. Amanda walked in and placed the school schedule on the table. "We found this in your cabin." He looked at it, then up at her. "That doesn't prove anything." She opened another file. "I also have your fingerprints on the metal casing of the cassette recorder." Still, he didn't react. "I have a strand of hair collected from inside the shoe that we believe belongs to you. I have witness statements. I have motive." "No, you don't," he said. Amanda leaned forward. "Then help me understand. How did Emily end up under the floor of her own house?" He said nothing. She waited. Minute passed. Then he whispered something under his breath. Amanda leaned closer. "What was that?" "I wasn't the only one who knew." That stopped her. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. "You weren't alone?" Still nothing. Amanda slammed the folder shut. "You had a chance. You still do. But if you think staying quiet will protect you now, you're wrong. That girl begged for help. She left her voice behind. And it led us to you." Glenn didn't move. She stood. "I'll see you in court." As she left the room, Glenn called after her. He told her she could trust him. Amanda froze. She turned back. "Who?" Glenn smiled, just slightly, then closed his eyes. That night, Amanda stood on the porch of the Carter house, looking at the streetlights blinking in the distance. Emily had walked this road once, and then never again. Now, after all this time, a man sat in custody. But the truth wasn't whole, not yet. Someone else knew. Someone else helped. Glenn Weaver had kept a box of memories for 17 years. But he hadn't kept them for himself. He'd kept them for someone else. And the next chapter of Emily's story was still buried, waiting to be found. The box sat in the center of the table, plain and unremarkable. A dusty Skechers shoebox with its corners softened by age, the lid held down by a strip of fraying masking tape. Its weight was small, but the air in the room was not. Inside it, Lindsay Moore kept a secret that had lived in darkness for nearly 2 decades. "I didn't know what to do with it," she said quietly. "It just sat in my closet." Detective Amanda Louie nodded but didn't speak. She watched as Lindsay peeled the tape slowly, hands shaking just enough to be noticed. They were seated in a small interview room at the Pine Bluff Police Department, but it felt more like a confessional loan that had taken 17 years to reach. Lindsay lifted the lid. Inside were folded papers, a dried rose from a high school formal, a letter never sent, and at the bottom, wrapped in an old T-shirt, was the second cassette. Another tape. Amanda reached forward and took it gently. It had the same handwriting. "Emily, October 1996, tape 2. Amanda glanced at Lindsay. "Did you ever listen to it?" Lindsay nodded slowly. "Only once. I couldn't handle it again." Amanda stood. "Let's listen together." Of Clove? In the forensic audio lab, Amanda sat alone. A reel-to-reel tape deck had been brought in, cleaned, calibrated. The tech dimmed the lights and left her with the headphones. She took a breath, then pressed play. There was static at first, then a click, and then Emily's voice. But this time, not calm. This time, broken. "If anyone finds this, please. I didn't mean to lie. I didn't mean to make anyone worry. I just didn't know what else to do." Amanda leaned in. The room around her seemed to narrow, the walls blurring behind the voice that filled her ears. "He says no one will believe me, that people will think I wanted this. I didn't. I swear I didn't." There was a rustle, like the tape recorder had shifted in her hands. Then she whispered something so softly it barely registered. "It's not just him. A pause. Then, someone else knows. Someone at school. He said he saw us. I begged him not to tell. He said he wouldn't if I promised not to tell either. Amanda's fingers clenched. Emily continued, I think I'm being watched. Not just from the house. At school too. I saw him in the hall today. He smiled at me, like nothing's wrong. Then the tape went silent for a long time. Then, a final line, nearly inaudible. If I disappear, please tell my mom I tried. Amanda sat in the silence that followed, heart pounding. There was no mistaking what she'd just heard. Emily had been groomed, trapped, and possibly blackmailed into silence by not just one person but two. One, an adult. The other, a peer. Someone at Pine Bluff High. Olive. That evening, Amanda revisited the school's 1996 yearbook. She flipped through the pages, stopping at the sophomore class photos. Emily was there, smiling softly, wearing the same pale blue collared shirt the forensic team had matched from the crawl space. Next to her, 3 seats over, was a boy named Jesse Dalton. Amanda had seen his name before. Not in the police files, but in a passing line from Emily's diary, recovered early in the investigation. Jesse helped me with algebra again. He's always so nice, but I don't think he likes people knowing we talk. Amanda pulled his student record. No major incidents, no suspensions, but a note from a counselor dated 2 weeks before Emily disappeared. Student Jesse Dalton reported to have spent time with E. Carter off campus without permission, parents not notified. Amanda frowned. She checked court records. No adult criminal history, but a sealed juvenile complaint in 1997, contents unavailable. She requested access through the DA's office. The next morning, she had it. Jesse Dalton, age 16, was questioned in connection with a harassment complaint from a freshman student. No charges filed. Case closed. Amanda tapped her pen. Jesse Dalton still lived in Arkansas, worked in construction, no social media presence, lived alone in a small duplex on the east side of Pine Bluff. She drove there the following afternoon. The house was quiet. A satellite dish tilted toward the sky. Lawn unmowed. No car. She knocked. No answer. She left a card in the door. That night, her phone rang. It was him. "This is Jesse," he said flatly. "You left your card. I don't know what this is about." Amanda's voice was steady. "I need to ask you about Emily Carter." Silence. Then, "I haven't heard that name in years." "I think you have," Amanda replied. Another silence. Then he hung up. Info. The following day, Amanda returned to his house with a second officer. This time, Jesse answered the door. His face was pale. He looked younger than 34, smaller. His eyes never held contact. Amanda asked if they could talk. He stepped outside. "I didn't do anything," he said before she even asked. "We found tapes," she said. "Emily mentions you." He blinked. She was confused. She thought I was going to tell. Tell what? He hesitated. "I saw her with that man. The one next door. She didn't know I saw, but I think he knew I did." Amanda nodded. "Why didn't you say anything in 1996? "I was scared," he whispered. "I didn't want him coming after me." "Did he threaten you?" "Number. But he didn't have to." Amanda studied him. "There's more, isn't there?" Jesse looked away. "I told her to keep quiet, that if she made it worse, no one would believe her." "You were 16. "I was stupid." He didn't deny it. Amanda asked for a DNA sample. He agreed. As the officers drove away, Amanda knew the scope of what Emily had endured was larger than what the police ever believed. She had been watched, silenced, manipulated, not just by the man from next door, but by someone her own age, someone she trusted. Back at the lab, DNA results from the shoe were still inconclusive. The degraded hair sample had no root, no full profile, but the voice on the tape, it wasn't just Emily's version, and, quote, a forensic audio analyst confirmed that the faint whisper captured in the final seconds of tape won the voice that said, "You said you'd be quiet," was not Glenn Weaver, and it wasn't Jesse Dalton. It was someone else, unidentified. Amanda now had a case expanding beyond the frame. Emily Carter had been cornered. Her world had narrowed to a crawl space, a cassette recorder, a button, a voice in the dark. She had left behind a map made of fragments. It was Amanda's job to read it. And now, with Glenn behind bars and Jesse in the shadows, Amanda stared at the evidence board and asked the one question no one wanted to say out loud. What if someone else was still out there, watching, waiting, and what if they never left? The 9th of August, 2013, 7:12 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen over Pine Bluff when the forensics team arrived on Wellington Drive. The light was weak, gold at the edges, stretching long shadows across the sidewalk. But inside the house at 218, there was no morning, no warmth, only silence and dust. Detective Amanda Louis stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching as the crew unpacked equipment. This time, it wasn't about clues, it wasn't about tape recorders, fingerprints, or speculation. This time, it was about remains. The trapdoor had revealed a crawl space. The crawl space had revealed a subfloor. And now, as new ground-penetrating radar swept across the earth beneath the kitchen, one thing had become heartbreakingly clear. Someone was buried beneath the floorboards. Amanda didn't need confirmation. She already knew who. But knowing it and seeing it were two different things. The lead forensic pathologist, Dr. Hannah Brooks, adjusted her gloves and ducked into the opening. The air was dry, stale. The crawl space was just over 3 feet high. Enough to kneel. Enough to disappear. At 7:54 a.m., a soft voice called from below. "We've got something." Amanda lowered herself into the dark. The walls around her were raw and unfinished. Wood beams crisscrossed above, dirt packed hard below. In the far corner directly beneath the kitchen sink was a raised mound of soil. The surface was uneven, as if it had been hastily covered. A different color, slightly domed. They started brushing. Small tools, steady hands, no words. Amanda's eyes never left the spot. The first thing they uncovered was fabric. Blue, pale blue, threadbare, sun-faded. The collar of a school uniform shirt. 1 inch beneath that, a fragment of plastic. The edge of a cassette recorder. And just beside it, bone. Small, porous, curved like a question mark. A human rib. Amanda turned her head slightly, her jaw tightening, her breath steadying. This wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was a grave. They worked for hours, slowly, respectfully. By noon, they had uncovered more. A femur, fractured once, now fused in the stillness of time. A shoe, the left one, matching the right, discovered in May. A bracelet, cloth, braided, faded pink and white. And finally, the skull. It was angled downward, resting sideways on the soil. A hair clip still clung to what was left of the skull plastic, shaped like a butterfly. Amanda stepped back. Karen Carter arrived at 12:04. She had asked to be called the moment anything was found. No cameras, no press, just her, standing in the kitchen of the home she once tried to forget. Amanda met her at the doorway. "It's her," Amanda said softly. Karen didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply walked to the threshold, looked down at the open floor, and whispered, "I knew." The autopsy was scheduled immediately. Emily Carter's remains were transported to the state medical examiner's office under escort. The hearse pulled away from Wellington Drive slowly, like it was carrying something sacred. Because it was. For 17 years, the story of Emily's disappearance had existed in fragments, rumors, speculation, faded photos in the back of high school yearbooks. Now there was a body. Now there was proof. The medical examiner confirmed the identity 2 days later using dental records and mitochondrial DNA from Karen. There was no doubt. Emily Carter had never run away. She had never wandered off. She had been here, all along. Izzy's? But that wasn't the end. In fact, the discovery raised new questions, urgent ones. Why hadn't Glenn Weaver buried her deeper? Why had he kept her there? Had he visited the house afterward? Was someone helping him? Amanda reviewed the autopsy findings. There were signs of blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. No fractures to the arms. No sign of defensive wounds. That detail stopped her. Emily hadn't fought back. She had been struck from behind. The official cause of death, homicide due to cranial injury and asphyxiation. Estimated time of death, within 24 hours of her disappearance. She had died the same day she left school. Amanda stared at the report for a long time. It wasn't just the violence, it was the silence. 17 years of it. Then she opened another folder, Glenn Weaver's property records. In the fall of 1996, 2 weeks after Emily's disappearance, Glenn purchased a large storage unit 12 miles outside town. It had been paid off for years. Amanda secured a search warrant. When they opened it, the inside was almost empty, except for one item, a black duffel bag. Inside, a collection of VHS tapes, a pair of binoculars, an empty pill bottle prescribed to Glenn in 1995, and a spiral-bound notebook. Most of the pages were blank, but on the last one, there was a list, handwritten, names, dates, times. Amanda's heart raced. Some of the names were unfamiliar, but near the bottom underlined, circled was one, Emily Carter, 10/9, 1:07 p.m. Amanda flipped the page. There was nothing else. No confessions, no map, just a timestamp, cold, mechanical. She stared at the notebook for a long time. It wasn't a diary, it was a log, a scheduler, and Emily had been part of it. Amanda brought the evidence back to the station. They confronted Glenn. He didn't deny the notebook. "I liked routine," he muttered. Amanda leaned across the table. "You kept a schedule of girls." He stared at the wall. "You left her under that floor." No answer. "Why?" He turned slowly. She was going to tell. Tell what? She was the one who didn't keep quiet. He said it like that was justification, like silence had been the price. Amanda stood. "I don't care why you did it," she said. "I care that you're going away for it." WW. That evening, Karen sat in the funeral home, alone with her daughter's remains. The casket was closed. She had chosen a photograph to sit on Topone from Emily's 13th birthday. A cupcake in her hand, a candle in her smile. She placed a cassette tape beside the picture. Not the original, a copy, a voice preserved. So Emily could be heard one more time. Listuvend. The funeral was held on the 17th of August. Small, private. Karen spoke briefly. She was smart, she was kind, and she never got to finish her story. Amanda stood in the back, silent. The case wasn't over. Glenn Weaver had been charged with first-degree murder, but the tape still held a second voice, and Jesse Dalton's role was still unclear. Amanda knew justice was only partially complete. Emily Carter had been found, but truth, that still lived beneath the floorboards of memory. Waiting. The 22nd of August, 2013, 5 days after Emily Carter was laid to rest. The town of Pine Bluff had fallen quiet again. The headlines were fading. The yellow tape was gone from Wellington Drive. On the surface, life moved forward as it always does when tragedy becomes memory. But Detective Amanda Louie wasn't done. Not yet. Because despite Glenn Weaver's arrest and the discovery of Emily's remains, a question still hung in the air, heavier than grief, sharper than guilt. Who was the second voice? It had haunted Amanda since she first heard it, the faint male whisper on the final seconds of tape 1. A voice Emily was afraid of, a voice not belonging to Glenn Weaver. And it wasn't Jesse Dalton either. The forensic audio team had run the sample against Glenn's vocal prints, against Jesse's, even against every adult male interviewed in the original 1996 case file. It matched none of them. The voice was adolescent, rough, uncertain, cracking at the edges, and it said just 5 words. "You said you'd be quiet." Amanda played it again and again. Then one night after midnight, she pulled out a box labeled 1996 Student Interviews, Sup. Inside were handwritten notes, most ignored at the time, statements from students who weren't close to Emily, background noise, gossip, hearsay. But one page stood out. A boy named Travis Gage, a junior at Pine Bluff High in 1996, had told the school counselor something strange. "Emily was in the basement with Mike. I saw them leave together." The counselor had scribbled, "Not credible." Mike C. denied. Amanda searched the yearbook. Michael Connor. Football team. 6-1. Smiling. Back row. Nowhere else in the case. She ran his name. No criminal record, but a sealed juvenile file closed 1998. She submitted a request. Within 48 hours, it came through. In 1998, 2 years after Emily vanished, Michael Connor had been arrested for assaulting a girl in Little Rock. Charges dropped after the victim's family declined to testify. Case sealed due to age. Amanda felt her jaw tighten. She traced him to a P.O. box in Pine Bluff. He had returned just months ago. A construction foreman. Single. No listed phone. She asked for a voice sample. There wasn't one. So she asked the Arkansas Department of Transportation to send a recent site safety video from his company recorded for liability training. 10 minutes in, Amanda heard it. Michael's voice. She forwarded the clip to audio forensics. They called back within 2 hours. It's a 94% match, the technician said. With noise reduction, it's likely the same speaker. Amanda didn't wait. By evening, Michael Connor was brought in for questioning. He didn't flinch when Amanda said Emily's name, but his eyes did shift. I was a kid, he said. Amanda held up a photo of the trapdoor. She trusted you. She was gonna tell, he muttered. She did, Amanda said, just not in time. Connor leaned back. His mouth trembled. I didn't kill her. Amanda's voice was flat. You helped bury her. No response. Amanda pressed the recorder, played the tape again. You said you'd be quiet. Michael's breath hitched. He didn't speak. He didn't deny. I do. The following week, a second arrest was made. Michael Connor was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. He never admitted to striking Emily, but he admitted to knowing, to watching, to saying nothing when Glenn Weaver led her through the back door of that house. He had been warned, keep her quiet, or you're next. So he did. He kept her quiet. And the silence had lasted 17 years. End alt. Karen Carter stood at her daughter's grave the morning the charges were announced. She didn't bring flowers. She brought the photograph, the one Emily had kept in her school binder, the two of them at the zoo. Ice cream dripping down Emily's hand, her smile tilted, shy but real. She's heard now, Karen said softly. She's been heard. End alt. Detective Amanda Louis returned to the house one last time. The new owners had moved back in. The trapdoor had been sealed, the kitchen remodeled, but the air inside still remembered. Amanda stepped into what had once been Emily's room. The afternoon light slanted across the floor. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a copy of the tape, not for evidence, for memory. She set it down gently on the windowsill. Emily's voice had brought them here, her courage, recorded in whispers. She hadn't just left a clue, she'd left a legacy. See fit? The final forensic report confirmed what they already knew. Emily had been lured, trapped, silenced. But she'd fought in the only way she could, by documenting, recording, hiding pieces of herself for someone to find. And someone did, 17 years too late, but just in time to end the silence. See fit? In the final scene of the documentary, the screen fades to black, and Emily's voice echoes one last time. If someone finds this, please tell my mom I didn't run. I was just trying to come home.